Good morning. How many of you work in healthcare? So we're a little bit singing to the choir this morning, aren't we? So I wanted to start out with another question. How many of you ever have run a race, gone to an event, 5K, 10K, done a walk? Some of you. Would you be happy with finishing 38th? Maybe, right? Depends on the size of the race. Like the sunburst in our community is coming up where there's 7,000, 8,000 people. I'd take 38th. It's pretty good. What about 38 out of 50? Some of you still might be, I'm just glad to finish the race. But I think it's in relative terms. And when you think about health in our country, we're not that much different than the rest of the country. But I guarantee you what separates those at the top of the list and the bottom half of the list are some pretty key issues and some pretty critical issues. And I was really happy to hear Dr. Fox talk about that it's not the delivery of health services, but that really accounts for, as he said, about 10% of the health of the community. And so, a lot of you work in healthcare and you're delivering healthcare services, and I think that's outstanding and that's a great calling. But the fact is that the biggest impacts to healthcare, and it's not very exciting, but oftentimes come through public policy and the ability to affect large populations through change in policy, through funding mechanisms, and through broad changes in the population's health. I was thinking about this morning, a couple of those things. What were they years and years ago? Can anybody name a couple of things that changed the health of millions and millions of lives all at once? Anybody guess? Seatbelts, that's a great one. Seatbelts. Fast food has changed it in the other direction. The HIP plan, access to health care. So go way back. Immunizations, vaccinations, sanitation, all the TIONs, right? There were these public policy changes that were enacted across either states, counties, nationally that made changes, broad changes that improved the health and improved our lives. And so I think that's part of what I want you to keep in mind today as we talk through some of the things we're talking about. And we're a small group today, so I think we're going to have a lot of good discussion. I think everybody has the agenda in your satchels, your bags, right? You've got them. And so we've got a good day planned here. We're going to have a few people come up and talk, provide some information. Then we're going to have a panel, and you're going to have an opportunity to ask some questions. So as we're working through this, I want you to be thinking about some questions you've got, because we've got some very talented people that can share more information with you and answer some questions. But I want to just go back to some of what was in the video about where we rank. 38th. And again, that's nothing to feel too great about. And that's a big issue. And you saw some of the breakdown, but I wanted to share with you specifically in St. Joe County, where we stand with a couple of these things. And we do a little better than the state average, but it doesn't mean we're anywhere near where we could or should be, right? So the first thing is 20% of adults smoke, including 11% of pregnant women in St. Joe County. And I saw that number, and it's a little disheartening, isn't it? 11% of moms. Because we know that has an impact on those babies and the lives of those babies going forward. 31% of adults are obese, 1 in 10 babies born premature, and overall we rank 59th out of 92 counties for health outcomes. And you saw Brian Mills up there. Brian Mills is the CEO of Community Health System in Indianapolis, and he was the chair of the Indiana Hospital Association. I'm currently the chair, and it was interesting, when I came into the chair role, Brian Tabor, the CEO of the Hospital Association said to me, he said, well, Kreg, what is your priorities for the state of, with hospitals? And I said, well, what work is left undone? And we talked about, well, this Indiana, the Healthy Alliance really has just gotten started. And we really hasn't taken root yet, and we have a lot more work to do. And so I said, then that's our priority. We need to continue that work because there's so much work to be done. And really, Brian, as he called out, was really the kind of the igniting factor there to getting a lot of people talking about this issue. And so this notion is about a grassroots effort around the state to get momentum to change public policy, And it takes people, individuals like you and me, to be very active in that, because without that, it's not going to happen on its own, likely. So we have a lot to do, and we know we're not healthy. How many of you have been, any one of those issues we've talked about, how many of you have been touched by that in your lives? Somebody you know, a friend, a family, almost everyone in the room, right, has had somebody who's been impacted by a premature birth, opioid addiction, obesity, smoker who's developed some form of cancer, something somewhere. I'll come back to that in a minute. So in order for us to really improve our health, it's going to take all of us. And I think there's benefit to that. And let me speak as in my role, in my day job role as the CEO of the health system, why we support that. Obviously, it's part of our mission, right? Our mission is to improve the health of our community. And the health of our community, we already talked about, isn't the fact that we have an ED or that we have a trauma program or we've got great doctors who can do surgery in an OR. That's just a very, very small piece of that. We also do a lot of programs in our community, and some of our staff is here, that work in the community around community health and those social determinants of health that actually will have more impact over longer terms than any one procedure we do on any one person. So very important. So the health system is very interested and very supportive of this initiative. So what are our goals for this Alliance Roadshow? One, it's improving the Hoosier health, and that will take a collaborative, concerted effort. So it is all about getting you interested and engaged, especially engaged and active, and asking you to get others engaged and active. Because when I asked the question about how many of you work in healthcare, again, that's great that you're here, but think of all the people who aren't here, who if they were here and we could get interested, the amount of change we could make, right? Much more impact if we could get others interested in this issue. And that is going to take legislative work, right? Public policy is changed through legislative work. And my involvement with legislative issues goes way back in my career. I've always had an interest in it because I've always recognized the impact it can have. And so I've, in the past, have made trips to the state houses where I've lived. I've also been to Washington several times, and actually going to Washington Sunday for some work on the part of IHA and AHA, the American Hospital Association. And so again, we need your help to work with lawmakers, to be in contact, to be sending messages to our lawmakers, to begin to influence these policies. So I wanted to share with you, that's in my day job, and that's my professional side. But for personally, I wanted to share a couple things personally about why I have an interest in these sorts of issues. So my grandfather was a smoker. Smoked from the day I was born until I was 7 years old. And he stopped when I was 7 years old because I asked him to stop. And it was, I still remember I was in his, I don't even know who made them. It was an Opel. Who made Opels? The car. Oh, anybody remember? Renault? It was a French car, and all I remember was this weird little car, and he was smoking, and I was in there with him. And I said, Grandpa, will you stop doing that? And he looked at me and said, yeah, sure. And he stopped, and he never picked up another cigarette. Well, he died when I was 12. And it was a big loss. I mean, that was a big loss to me. And I always wonder, had he never smoked, how much longer would he have lived? Because he died from a heart attack. And as we know, smoking has a big impact on artery disease. And so you wonder. And so my life was directly impacted in a big way at a young age by this issue of smoking. So outside of that, how many of you are employers? You have a company, you're a supervisor, even though you don't own the company, you're hiring people. Let me ask that. How many of you make hiring decisions in your organization? More of you. How hard is it to find talent these days? Really hard. How hard is it to find healthy talent these days? Even harder. Think about the pool of people available to work, even as a colleague. the pool is not that big to begin with. What do we have right now in Indiana unemployment in this area? It's like 2-3%, 4%. So there's not a lot of available people. And then if you're looking for health, we use a term in our organization, happy, healthy, and awesome. How many people are happy, healthy, and awesome that you can find out there? That's even harder. And when you think about the number of people that fall into these categories of smoking, obesity, chronic disease, opioid addiction, that pool gets even smaller. And for most of us, we work. It's part of who we are and what we do, and a good, healthy lifestyle and life is having a sense of purpose, showing up every day to do something. And the question is are we, and is everyone we work with, their best selves? Are they their best selves? And when you have these issues that affect so many people, I would say there's no way they can be their best selves. Absolutely not. And I don't know about you, but I kind of care about that. I care about other people living a pretty great life. And so again, I think, you can do a lot of things individually, personally. You can do a lot of things one-on-one, one-on-two to affect people's lives. Me with my grandfather all those years ago. That was a home run. But I can tell you we can do a lot more by influencing public policy and making changes at that level that indirectly and ultimately directly affect your friends, your family, and your colleagues. And it's a big challenge, but I think we're very capable of taking this on. So there's a few things we're going to ask of you today, 4 things. And they're, calls to action. So the first thing is, everybody got your bag? So take a look in your bag, because later we're going to ask you to do something. That's fill out a postcard. There's a postcard in there, and we're going to send these postcards to the governor's office. So I want you to know that there's a postcard in there, and there's some example language, and we'll come back to that. The second is, how many of you are tweeters? Facebookers? More of you? What's left? Instagrammers? Asked my wife what she was, what's that? LinkedIn? Yeah, so my wife, she's a fitness instructor, so you can tell what I do a lot. We have a lot of fitness in our family. She was up this morning with me, sitting on the couch, doing this number. I said, what you doing? Look at my Instagram feeds. I'm not an Instagrammer. I have Facebook and LinkedIn. But one thing we'll ask you to do is if you have digital media and social media, there's a hashtag Healthier Indiana that you can use. You can post some of the materials we've got to your Facebook and your LinkedIn, and we'll provide some of that information. And the other thing is to visit healthierin.org. And there's a join us on the top right corner. We want you to consider doing that. And then today, for those of you that are brave enough, and if I have to bribe some people, I'll be glad to do it. We're actually going to have a camera crew set up, and we'd like to film you. And we'd like to film you giving a message about what you think about this initiative and why you think it's important. There's nothing more powerful than individual citizen messages to your legislators. Nothing more powerful. And I will tell you, it's one thing when they hear from the CEO of a company, especially a company in healthcare, about a healthcare issue. Because that there's a bias there, right? I must have a self-interest. And so they will listen a lot more to those individuals that come from a broad base of the community who just care about an issue and want them to act on it. And so again, we'll have a camera ready and ask you to take part in that if you're brave enough. And I would encourage you to. You'll be surprised at how good you look on camera. All right. So thank you. Thank you again to Dr. Fox for the use of the facility. This is a nice venue to have this, nice sized room. We can have some dialogue here in a little bit. So we appreciate that very much. And thank you for spending the time with us this morning. And thank you for your interest, at least your interest in this topic by showing up today. And as I've said, there's a lot more work to do.